Globalisation is the close integration of countries and people around the world, also known as internationalisation. A company is only classified as being global once it has integrated its departments worldwide and sets its marketing strategy focus on an equivalent scale too. This is referred to as a global strategy. A business which has the aim of going global would need to employ people who are a part of or have a clear understanding of the culture in which the company is planning to expand to. Global companies often offer the same product in different countries but modified in a way to meet the local tastes. Those who approve of globalisation count as contributions to include higher economic growth and standards of living, increased sharing of technologies and more extensive cultural integration. And although the Indian film market did globalise out of its local sphere, it did not take advantage of much of these contributions. Looking into the film industry, globalisation continues at a fast pace during the 1920s with the advancement of European film production. During the World War I, film production declined and the Americans rushed to fill the gap in, being the start to their major success within the film industry via Hollywood. Hollywood expanded abroad through vertical integration by setting up distribution networks overseas. Whilst Hollywood dominated the world market in terms of commercial success, other countries also made important culturally relevant films. However, these films did not enjoy as much success as Hollywood did, with only France and the UK being their two major competitors. Not only was culture a major issue which countries were not able to overcome, as well as the language factor, but the high sunk costs that rose rapidly with production meant that the film producers were only able to obtain substantial profits if they were able to achieve large sales, which wasn't the case with most countries. Even Hollywood, despite the size of their domestic market, needed foreign sales to make a profit at times. The Indian film industry, on the other hand, was only at the phase of globalising just like the economy. Mainly concentrated in two locations, Mumbai and Chennai, Bollywood was highly popular in India and Southeast Asia. The genres and storylines of the films that Hollywood and Bollywood produced varied significantly. Where Hollywood consisted of mixed genres, Bollywood was mainly musical-based. This differentiating factor may have made Bollywood movies quite predictable, whereas Hollywood was full of action and constant change and adventures. This was only one possible factor why Bollywood was not successful in Hollywood. Although both markets were making significant amounts of films and merging at times, the Indian market was generating less revenue than the US market. The low revenues were down to two main factors. The ticket prices in the Indian market were much lower compared to many countries, and the piracy present limited the liabilities of producers to derive deserved revenues from the home video market. So the domestic economy that the two markets were in made a difference upon their success rates too. The invention of new media technologies such as satellite television and the internet facilitated the spread of movies. However, the government's hesitance to recognise Bollywood as a legitimate industry led to most banks refusing to lend producers money to finance films, which is also tied into the economic factor. The final but most significant factor that may have held back the Indian film market from globalising fully was language. The fact that English is a language that is used and understood by many countries worldwide advantaged Hollywood and was a potential disadvantage for Bollywood. Although subtitles were put into place as well as some voiceovers, the same success compared to Hollywood was not achieved. These all led to the liabilities of foreigners, where the foreign firms experienced disadvantage in host countries because of their non-native status.
Indian cinema possesses a big target audience. In fact, with about 15 million NRIs, which are spread across the globe, the demand for Bollywood movies is felt globally and not just locally. Despite this, it poses little threat to Hollywood films, which are dealing in the same market. Some of the reasons for this can be language, cultural, and financial barriers, which Bollywood filmmakers face against their Hollywood counterparts. American filmmakers can compete with Bollywood films if they acquire a more local approach and make films specially targeting the South Asian market. Movies like Bend It Like Beckham are prime examples of this. Bollywood deals in a market worth 1.5 billion US dollars. With rising middle class in India, these figures will be rising in the coming future. American studios can set up joint ventures with various local film houses to have an overview of the demand of the target audience and then can access this market more effectively. Another approach which American filmmakers can use to approach the Indian film market is to have majority of cast as local stars of Indian cinema. This can have a greater impact as people from the South Asian background can now relate themselves more easily with the characters of the film. Slumdog Millionaire is a prime example of this approach.
What is the best strategy for Bollywood to go global? Here we are using the CAGE framework to analyze the differences between India and the United States. The first component is cultural factors. From a language perspective, there are more Indians that speak English than Americans speaking Hindi. Also, there are more countries, therefore a larger population, speaking English compared to Hindi. To view it in terms of population, there are more Indians in the US than Americans in India, so there is a stronger American influence in India than vice versa. Another major difference between these two countries are the ethnicity and religion. Indians are Asians and the majority of Americans are Caucasians. Likewise, the prevalent religion in India is Hinduism, whereas the most common belief in America is Christianity. Regarding culture, American culture is generally perceived as more open and liberal, whereas Indian culture tends to be more conservative. Viewing from an administrative perspective, there are no colonial ties between India and the US. English language might have been brought into India by previous colonizers, so from then on, the language remained in India. In both countries, the government structure is similar in the way that they're both federal republic and democratic. Going on to the third part of the CAGE framework, India and the US are geographically far from each other, one locating in the Eastern Hemisphere and one in the West. America is a bigger country in terms of land area compared to India, and there is also a longer coastline in the US. Infrastructure is more developed in the US than in India. For example, there is a more established transportation system to travel within the US than in India. In terms of climate, since India is located closer to the equator, the country is hotter on average. In America, the temperature would be lower since it is located at a higher latitude. There are differing natural phenomena, examples including snowstorms and tornadoes in the US and cyclones and floods in India. The last aspect is economic. The total GDP in India is lower at $2 trillion, while the US has a total GDP of $16.8 trillion. At the same time, the US has a more mature economy in comparison to India in terms of development. Also, costs of production would be lower in India because there is less established infrastructure. In terms of the strategies Bollywood can implement in the real world, one of the tactics is targeting the Indian diaspora. By the 1990s, Bollywood had unintentionally experienced an increased income from the Indian diaspora based in foreign lands. They are successful and enjoy their new homes, but the small percentage within the US and spatial segregation in this huge territory would promote a tendency for virtual unity through cultural media. Diasporic expenditure on Bollywood films becomes not only a method of ascertaining community ties and preserving a distinct cultural identity in foreign lands, but also clearly a reflection of diasporic pride in the homeland. Marketers arrange for promotions particularly targeted at Indian Americans. For example, insurer State Farm planned a karaoke contest where clients could upload videos to a website and allow viewers to vote on 2 finalists. The prize was a trip to India to sing in a Bollywood film. However, merely relying on the Indian diasporic audience is not sufficient. There is a need to draw on other global markets and ethnic communities as well.
A second approach would be focusing on distribution. Some Indian producers have established environments within the US to oversee distribution. Bollywood is the leading foreign exporter to the US entertainment market, with winning films being screened in up to 75 US cinemas, some earning in surplus of $1 million in their opening weekend, promoting them to the top 20 box office charts. Indian entertainment companies have to establish themselves outside of India as well. For example, Pyramid Chimera, a South Indian-based film production and distribution house, has over 900 movie theatres with a capacity of 550,000 seats in the US, India, Malaysia, Singapore and China. By 2011, with over 2,000 cinemas, Pyramid's global business was expected to rake in 75% of revenues, up from 20%. The third strategy can be investment and acquisition. Bollywood distributors methodically supply movie theatres in the main diasporic markets and acquire cinema chains and production companies outside of India. For example, Reliance Entertainment, a subsidiary of Reliance Group, has undertaken many partnerships. As of 2008, Reliance positioned a $500 million investment at Steven Spielberg's DreamWorks. Reliance diversified its film ventures in 2010 with the acquisition of a majority stake, with 76% in IM Global, the international sales company run by Stuart Ford, once co-head of international distribution for Miramax Films. IM Global, which has expanded its reach over the years, took positions in films such as The Butler, Insidious and Paranormal Activity. IM's revenues now top $100 million with output deals in 30 countries. In late 2012, Reliance struck a deal with Wanda, the Chinese company that acquired the AMC theatre chain, with an initial focus on real estate development. Furthermore, Reliance Entertainment has purchased over 200 movie theatres in 28 US cities in search of global expatriate communities and to establish a fully integrated Indian entertainment conglomerate. Reliance hopes to connect with US Bollywood fans through its US movie theatres. The last method to consider in going global is operational modification. The transnational introduction of Hindi movies has catalyzed aesthetic changes while simultaneously adopting westernized visual styles. In global media, American infotainment remains the leading industry. Other operational modifications has been done through ever-expanding co-production opportunities between different agents in the local and global industry. Warner Brothers released Hollywood-made Chandni Chowk to China in 2009, a Bollywood-style martial arts movie intended for the world market. Slumdog Millionaire has been able to bridge cultural gaps by incorporating Bollywood elements and only a small number of songs, satisfying both Western and Indian audiences, though the latter evidently to a lesser extent as the film was less commercially successful in India compared to worldwide revenues.
As a conclusion, we feel that although Bollywood clearly evolved through the years and still is evolving, the Indian film industry was not able to achieve a semi-globalization, but although they're global in a sense, they have not achieved it completely. Culture, language and funds were Hollywood's biggest drivers and Bollywood's biggest barriers. The fact that these factors were set and not easily changeable is what caused the damage. But looking at the entire globe and not just America, Bollywood had the potential to become more dominant and influential, but did not make good use of marketing, for example, Kite. Globalization, however, is not another term for Americanization and a comparison to Hollywood, which holds many advantages in hand, isn't the best option either. Looking at it from a broader perspective will help give a clear and a better picture.